If you couldn't tell, starting with our very first guest this morning, Andy Masich, one of our favorite guests. When he stops by to talk about Pittsburgh history today, it's always a pleasure. No one makes history more fascinating than Andy as president and CEO of the Heinz History Museum. That's kind of his job.
Well, and today's topic might not seem like fun, but it sure is fascinating. A piece of Pittsburgh history from 125 years ago this month, and Andy is here to tell us what happened and how it ended in an infamous failed assassination attempt. Good morning.
Good morning. You know, almost everyone who's lived in Pittsburgh for any amount of time at all has heard of the Homestead Strike. This was the strike of steel workers working at Homestead for Carnegie Steel, and they took over the steel mill in 1892. And Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick were the management, and there was a battle. Pinkerton's detectives came in on a barge from Pittsburgh with Winchesters blazing. The miners fought back with a brass cannon. Women, 2,000 of them, lined the banks, the wives of the steelworkers, saying, "Kill the Pinkertons! Kill the Pinkertons!"
How did it get to that point, Andy?
It was nuts. So Henry
Can you
Clay
imagine
Frick,
that happening today?
It is the most remembered event in American labor history, and it happened right here in Pittsburgh 125 years ago. But here's the backstory. Henry Clay Frick, you know the Frick Mansion right here in Pittsburgh today. You can go visit it. He was given authority by Andrew Carnegie, the richest man in the world at that time, to break the strike at Homestead. The strikers had taken over the mills. Carnegie and Frick couldn't access them. So he felt he had to do something. So this great battle erupted, and the Pinkertons lost. The management lost because American public opinion was against the strikers. So Alexander Berkman and Emma Goldman, two anarchists.
Wait a minute, American public opinion was against the strike breakers, wasn't it?
It was against the strike breakers.
Breakers, yeah.
And because they felt like, well, these steel workers are hardworking Americans, you know, we should back them. But then these anarchists came onto the scene and they plotted to assassinate Henry Clay Frick.
Yeah.
He had an office in downtown Pittsburgh, and
were these anarchists, Andy? Were they steel workers or were they outsiders?
They were outsiders. They were anarchists who believed in changing America's labor system, but they wanted to do it not through propaganda of words, but through deeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Alexander Berkman breaks into Henry Clay Frick's office downtown Pittsburgh and shoots him twice with a revolver
in the neck.
In the neck and torso.
You know this story, don't
And then
you?
he takes out a dagger.
He stabs him too.
One of the steelworkers has made a dagger for Berkman, and that dagger is used to stab Frick repeatedly. The tip of it breaks off in Frick's leg. Frick's associates pulled the anarchist off Frick, and he's bleeding on the floor. They kind of get him up vertical, and he says, "Wait a minute, boys, before you take me away, I got to finish some work." And he signs the papers, the blood-spattered papers on his desk, and then they haul him off. Well, Frick, for the rest of his life, couldn't move his neck. In fact, his golf game was a little awkward. He had a really awkward golf
like yours
swing.
and mine.
It's a little bit like mine, And but he survived, and public opinion turned against the strikers because they said, you know, Frick might have been a bad guy, but you don't go into his office and shoot him and stab him.
Right.
And so it actually turned public opinion the other way. Berkman went to jail for 14 years. Emma Goldman, who was really the mastermind behind this, she was a leader of the women's movement, women's reproductive rights.
Well, I mean, she was a supporter of the assassination attempt?
Yes, she was probably the mastermind. She would visit Berkman in prison, may have borne his love child. We don't know. They were lovers. And then both of them were deported to Russia.
How about that?
In the end, they shipped them out.
They
got rid of them.
They came back to North America, but they only got as close as Canada. They wouldn't let them back into the country.
Wow.
But it's an amazing story. I mean, sex, violence, labor history.
Where's the movie that should have been made of this?
Seriously. And you also mentioned in your notes 16 other deaths during this
Oh,
time.
yeah. The Pinkertons suffered casualties at the hands of the steelworkers. The steelworkers were shot down by the Pinkertons. It was a bloody mess until the National Guard was called in. And to this very day, the Homestead Strike, as it's known, and the aftermath, the Berkman-Frick assassination attempt, is considered one of the, I guess, most disputed and best known of all the labor unrest in American history.
Yeah. What an incredible story.
Simply incredible. The way that you two were telling that, it almost seemed like both of you were there.
Well,
Got goosebumps.
we're almost old enough.
Well, you can see that dagger, the very dagger that was used to stab Henry Clay Frick, is on exhibit at the Heinz History Center now.
That's incredible.
And the tip of that dagger is in Frick's leg in
his thigh
Homewood
bone,
Cemetery.
I think. Yeah.
How did you guys
With
come
him.
to acquire it? How do you have it?
You know, it was donated. The History Center's been collecting things since 1879. It's the oldest cultural institution in Pittsburgh. And along the way, someone found the evidence from the trial and donated it to the History Center.
Incredible. Incredible.
Amazing stuff. Andy, thank you. Always
You
a
bet.
pleasure. You bet, pal. Come see other pieces of Pittsburgh past at the Heinz History Center on Smallman Street in the Strip District. Folks, you don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
It's always a great visit. And watch for more Pittsburgh history today here on PTL when Andy joins us as a regular guest.